Yeah, good morning, and thank you all for joining us. It's a pleasure to have everybody here. Yes, I am CEO and owner of Loop1. I am one of the architects of Lime. I've been doing this for a while now. I started my career back in the late 90s at Microsoft, doing things like monitoring beta servers for things like DNS and DHCP and Winds. So I feel like I've been in the monitoring realm for a while now. And I was an aspiring triathlete. I've finished about 9 sprint events before tearing my meniscus. So now our wonderful co-host, Jeff Stewart, is kicking my butt on Strava on a daily basis. Jeff, good morning. Welcome.
Bill, thanks for having me.
So Jeff, you want to give us a little bit of your background and then we'll jump into it here?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jeff Stewart. I'm the field CTO and vice president of global sales engineering at SolarWinds. I've been at SolarWinds for about 11 and a half years now. Prior to that, I was a customer of SolarWinds and a network engineer for a university in Kentucky. I was also a SWAC MVP for a period of time before SolarWinds kind of scooped me up and said, "Hey, come work for us," which I gladly did and have been since. Spent most of my time within the sales engineering organization, but also within our product management organization for a few years, working on the network products. And as Bill mentioned, we got a little Strava competition going, so I had to add the bullet point of a professional Peloton rider these days, as I don't get enough time to actively participate outside like I'd like to.
Yeah, even without all the active participation, you're still way ahead of me these days in terms of activity. I got to figure out something with this torn meniscus. It's been
Yeah.
nagging me for a while. So let's jump into. We are going to talk a bit about observability and the relationship between observability and maturity. So just a couple notes here on Loop1, if you're not familiar with us. We've been affiliated with SolarWinds either through our EMEA organization or our North American organization for nearly 20 years now. I've actually been using the SolarWinds solutions for 20 years myself. I started back in 2000 with the engineers tool set and have been using it off and on all the way through since then. We have at the moment more than 25 SolarWinds certified professionals holding more than 130 different SolarWinds certified professional designations. If you're interested in learning more about the SCP, check it out on thwack.com or hit us up at Loop1. We'll tell you about how you can get certified in SolarWinds. We've done more than 4,500 professional services engagements since 2009, and we also support clients through delivery of public training classes as well as our proactive managed services that we offer. So there's a number of different ways you can engage with us if you are looking for help with your Orion platform. Today, we number about 100 employees across 4 continents, including our 24/7 NOC, which is run out of Sri Lanka. And we, of course, have offices in Europe and the United States. At the moment, our current tenure for our engineering team is about 7 years of experience for a given engineer. So what we're going to talk about today is a bit of a refresher on something we created about 3 years ago, which we call the Loop1 Monitoring Maturity Model. And the idea behind creating Lime was to be able to give sort of a scorecard and a roadmap to, deploying the tools that you use for monitoring and knowing that you're deploying them in a very mature way. So one of the very first things that we created here is what we call our self-assessment grid. And what you can see here is this grid goes from ad hoc to insightful in terms of maturity. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the theme of each of these phases. On the left side, you'll notice that we go from ITSM down to network, and you'll notice that for the server tier, we're also referring there to serverless, right? So you might have containers, microservices, but what we're talking about is the methodologies for monitoring applications and the services or containers that they live in. And so, we're very conscientious that this model is not just an on-prem model, but it is a hybrid and cloud model as well. The thing you might notice about the grid is that it doesn't explicitly have a security column or a security row, and that is because if you look closely and you read through the various ratings that are in there, they all deal with security. Because for Loop1, security is intrinsic to what we do, right? So there isn't so much this case of, designing and deploying and then going back and securing after the fact, as was the case, years ago in a lot of technologies. Today, security is a part of the conversation from the beginning and throughout. So a little bit here about why we created Lime, right? The idea here was that we looked across the industry. It was really difficult to find solutions, especially at sort of that director or CTO level, to really be able to say, what are the best practices for running, IT operations without having to go full on ITIL. So if you start to look across the industry, you'll find ITIL out there. And I think ITIL certainly has value, but ITIL can be a little bit oppressive for some organizations. Jeff, I don't know, what's your experience with ITIL been?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, Bill. I don't think we get the full picture with ITIL. I mean, it's certainly a great framework to help professionals think about how they're doing things, but I think you've got to go beyond that and be a little bit more agile and flexible as you move through those frameworks.
Yeah, I think that is one of the other downsides to something like ITIL is that it is not really, into the details of tool and tool instrumentation and tool implementation. So,
Yep.
Lime is something that's very, prescriptive in terms of the way that we describe, which tools we're going to use and how we're going to use them and what that's going to allow us to achieve. The other thing that you'll see about Lime from a client perspective, as those of you who work with Loop1, is that it is to some extent vendor agnostic. Now, obviously, SolarWinds is our preferred partner. We're going to talk a lot about why SolarWinds is our preferred partner today, the quality of the tools that they bring. But that doesn't mean that we only look at SolarWinds, right? There's tools that we use from companies like Runecast that bring VMware vulnerability capabilities. And then there's integrations with other third-party tools like ServiceNow, bidirectional integrations that are all part of our Lime framework.
Yeah, and Bill, that's one of the things that I really love about that Lime framework. To your point, you're not vendor agnostic, but it really allows you guys to come in and get a full picture of the environment and understand cross vendors. Where are the gaps? Where are we at from our monitoring perspective, and how can we improve and become more mature in our monitoring?
Exactly. And so I think today's session is a really great example of, kind of standing on the shoulders of giants where, for years we've talked about the concept of people, tools, and process, right? This is a long-standing, well-understood concept. And so within Loop1, we've simply taken that into the realm of what we call people, tools, and Lime. And I am so excited, Jeff, for where SolarWinds is on their journey right now. And even with your new title and kind of this field engagement model that you guys are moving to in terms of the way people work together.
Yeah, and excited is the right word, right? There's been lots of really cool things and exciting things to happen over my tenure at SolarWinds, the 11 and a half years. But, if I look at how we're thinking about the business and our customers and the products over the last year, there's really two major transformations that we're going through as a company with our new CEO, Sudhakar Ramakrishna. One is this people first focus, right? And that is not just the employees at SolarWinds, although he's done phenomenal things for the employees, but also how do we put our customers at the forefront of everything that we do? And so a number of activities and initiatives that are underway, really putting our customers first. And to your point, Bill, one of those is kind of this new field engagement model that we're working on, right? For years, we've had our customers asking us, hey, come visit us on site, come see what we're doing, talk to our CIO, our CTO, look at our environment. And, traditionally, we've been kind of an inside model, but I think, bringing in new leadership has brought in new opportunities where we're very excited to engage people where they live and where they are. So excited about that. The other transformation that I think we're really going through is around the tools, right? So we took a look at where we were and we took a look at the market and made some strategic decisions based on what our customers were telling us, the feedback they were giving us. And I think we'll get into this a little bit more later in the presentation, but you'll see a shift in how we think about monitoring to observability and maturity of customer environments.
Yeah, what we've been able to see as a partner, I'm excited for the rest of the client client field be able to start to learn about. And really just from that people perspective, we've seen obviously your role now with the field title there and that outward engagement model, but also the establishment and the growth of your customer success team and some I'm always going to pronounce Anselm's last name wrong, but leadership now coming in for customer success, and Andrea Webb being promoted into the Chief Customer Officer chair. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of from the customer success side of things, what's new for clients and what they can expect from SolarWinds going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the last year and a half, we've made significant investment in that customer team, right? Again, being people first and customer focused, really allowed us to step back and, think about our customers and how they use our tools and what, in that customer journey where they're at. And so, Anselm and Andrea really built out this fantastic team of customer success professionals that, engage with our customers at a different point in their life cycle, right? So me and my team are engaging with customers and prospects, in pre-sales and talking about, business outcomes and how we can really help them. But we've got to hand that off to another part of our business, and that's the customer success team. And how can they continue to help customers utilize and fully realize the value in the tools that they moved forward with too, right? And that goes with a partnership with Loop1 also, right? How can we get Loop1 in there to help them also maximize that investment that they've made? So huge customer focus, very exciting times at SolarWinds.
Appreciate that. And yeah, I think that's really the role from a people perspective that Loop1, I think we've proven over the years. And now with the direction that SolarWinds is moving in, it's just getting even easier to do this. And that is to really be kind of the glue between both the client environment and the SolarWinds environment, to be able to have that day-to-day expertise and knowledge of, best practices for deploying and using the tools, joining that up with a knowledge and understanding of the SolarWinds organization in terms of the people and which chairs they're in and how we can benefit from the skills and experience, whether that's in support or whether that's in customer success or whether that's in pre-sales and architecture and design. Our team really being able to connect with your team and then bring those ties together. And I think one of the other things I'm really looking forward to, and we don't know right now what this is going to look like, but I can imagine there's going to be a lot more in-person events in different parts of the world where, SolarWinds will be ready to bring, those teams out and engage with clients in a new way. And I think that'll be an exciting part of kind of the people part of what we'll see going forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're ready to get out, ready to travel again, and start engaging with people, face to face through events or more personalized, meetings. So excited about that as well.
And it'll be great to see that at every level, right? THWAC is still obviously a big part of the story, but I think we will see more in terms of directors and executives as well, having, ways to engage with SolarWinds. So terrific. So the tools part of this conversation is something we're going to spend a lot of talking about through the rest of this presentation. So we'll just mention here, like kind of I touched on previously, right? In terms of, working with SolarWinds tools, it's really about getting as much of the functionality out of the platform as you can according to your business's needs. So we're going to go into detail in that. That's really what drives the model. And that's where the Lime processes come in, right? It's our runbook, our framework, our scorecard. It's that methodology that we've got years and years of experience looking at every module, every feature, and really bringing it to bear within a client environment. So, as we kind of take this now and apply sort of the observability perspective to it, it's an interesting trend that's happening right now across the industry. And so the first thing I want to talk about here is just, what does observability mean to you, right? So for those of you that are on the call today, I will tell you, in my experience, this past 9 to 12 months, I've been talking observability with different folks, and generally the response that I get, it depends on the role that they've had. So you'll see in this slide at the bottom on the left and the right, we talk about roles. So the folks that have generally been using the phrase monitoring are what I would call traditional IT roles with sort of an on-prem focus, but increasingly having some cloud exposure to the point now where basically everybody's got some cloud exposure and some hybrid signature out there. From an observability perspective, it's been pretty easy to notice that most of the time, if I have somebody using the language around observability, they've probably been in a more cloud-focused role, and they've probably been doing more DevOps or maybe a site reliability engineer or maybe even a developer in the cloud. So what has your experience been there, Jeff, and sort of who's using this language and using it differently from monitoring to observability?
Yeah, no, and you're spot on. And I actually kind of think about my days at Western Kentucky University, and kind of the silos that were almost built up within the IT departments, right? You had your sysadmins and your network engineers and your DBAs, and none of those folks really talked to each other. And honestly, back 10 years ago, they didn't have to be successful at their jobs. And so you ended up with these silos. I think as time has gone on, we've kind of broken those silos down around monitoring, right? And you have your IT practitioners that are focused on monitoring. But as we've gone through digital transformation and acceleration of modernizing applications and a shift to cloud and hybrid environments, we started to see this movement around observability. And to your point around SRE and DevOps personas. But effectively, what we've done is we've just created another silo where you have these folks that are over here saying, I'm doing observability, and these folks that are doing monitoring, and created, in my mind, a silo where you can't get the complete picture without having both, right? Monitoring is the foundation of observability. Without monitoring, you don't get true visibility into that full stack across both of those silos.
Yeah, I found it interesting as I was doing my research. I read a book that was published by a vendor, and it was kind of all about observability. And it really sort of took monitoring to task and said, monitoring isn't successful. Monitoring has a history of leaving us in a reactive state. And I had to laugh because about a month after finishing that book, that same vendor released a new tool called metrics, for that vendor. And I just was like, well, I guess you're admitting that monitoring has its place. And so I really love the way that SolarWinds has phrased it. As we've seen SolarWinds start to bring this observability message to market. And for some of you, this might be brand new. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see more of it soon. Some of you may have started to see it a little bit towards the end of last year. But it really is based on this theme that monitoring is the foundation of observability, as Jeff said a moment ago, and as we have there on the slide. And so for me, what that boils down to is, where do we have our metrics coming from, right? And we're very comfortable with metrics, right? From a monitoring perspective, this is the root of, monitoring when it's done well, is accurate metrics collected where they need to be collected in the sample intervals that they need to be collected, and collected, with the retention settings that are needed. And we'll talk more about that as we get into sort of the Loop 1 approach through Lime. But, as we move more towards observability, it's that end-to-end perspective. And it honestly, for me, I think starts to drive a bit of an executive conversation where, as you mentioned, silos sometimes can get too focused and too maybe myopic around the thing that they care most about. And yet the executive leadership, the budget owners at a higher level, they're going to be concerned about that end-to-end performance. They're going to be concerned about their phone ringing and people complaining about applications being slow or applications not working. And then that's where we start to get really into the realm of, application debugging and that sort of observability perspective on logs, right? Because the logs that we collect on-prem from networks is different than the logs that we collect in terms of observability. And so we see this with the AppOptics solution from SolarWinds, right? That code profiling and tracing capability. And now we want to marry those things together.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you're right. And you know, I'm currently working with a customer that's exactly what they're looking for, right? Is that end-to-end visibility. And right now they've got all these fragmented and siloed tools, and they even have an observability platform that they're using. And the biggest complaint that this CTO has is that he's got all these tools, he's got this budget, but it's fragmented. And a problem occurs, and everybody's looking around, looking in their tools, and nobody knows what's going on because the story's not connected and it's not intelligent. And I think that's really where SolarWinds is kind of going through this product transformation and trying to really, focus on how we can solve that end-to-end problem, regardless of the company profile, their infrastructure profile, and what they're trying to do. Really, we should have the capabilities of saying, here's a problem, or this is about to be a problem. Here is our recommendation based off of the connected story. And so, I think that's really where we're trying to redefine what observability means to folks based on, how we see it and how our customers are talking about their needs.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll go in a moment here into this next slide that Jeff will cover a little more kind of the direction that SolarWinds is headed. But as we get later in the presentation to kind of what we've built Lime around, you'll see us using this same language. You'll see us talking about fragmented, and you'll see us talking about typical and kind of the themes behind those phases of maturity. But what you just said a moment ago, Jeff, absolutely hits home, right? It's how do we really give organizations that end-to-end visibility by tying tools together in ways that are really effective, including automated correlation? So, again, we'll dive a little more into those details as we get further into the slide deck, but maybe tell us a little bit about where SolarWinds is going and has begun to move over the period of sort of last quarter at the end of last year and this first quarter here in 22.
Yeah, and this is really the second transformation at SolarWinds that I talked about, right? Centered around products, which is where I'm really super interested. One as a previous consumer of these products, but also how we solve actual problems that our customers face on a daily basis. And so, we have at SolarWinds, in my mind, the most powerful platform for monitoring against any competitor on-prem offering, right? And that offering can be hosted in Azure, it can be hosted in AWS. It's an amazing monitoring offering, and that's the Orion platform, right? And we connect that to our database offering and our ITSM offering, and that's where we've made our customers really successful in their day-to-day duties. But as we thought about what was next, and collected customer feedback, there was a number of items and areas that we could really improve, and so that's where we started to think about observability and our transition to observability. And so today we have a new offering that we'll talk about a little bit more later, that really takes all of the best parts of our monitoring offering, packages those together, and allows you to get that full stack visibility that you're looking for. In addition, it paves the way for kind of our future roadmap, right? And we have some customers that are thinking about their digital transformation and thinking about, cloud first or SaaS offerings as where they want to ultimately end up based on their maturity. And so, on the chart below, you kind of see us with this hybrid observability offering that we have today. How do we continue that journey based on what our customers are telling us? And what our customers are talking about is, how do we make this more intelligent? How do we enrich that data with AI ops and machine learning to get more insight into, not only what's happening based on seasonality, what I need to do to correct it before it actually becomes a problem, and then how do I connect that with, this APM data and tell that full story, to your point about talking about debugging applications and looking at application logs. So if we can connect those two and live with a customer where they want to live, whether that's on premises or in the cloud, that is our end state.
Yeah, I think the journey that we're on here is something that Lime captures really well. And so the way that we first started talking about this is what we call our 5, 6, 7. And it starts with understanding the 5 phases of maturity. So we're going to run through those here in a moment. And then the real meat of what we do to help clients mature is what we call our 6 assessment areas, which also form the basis for our roadmap. And what we're so excited about now is it is so much easier with the new model that SolarWinds is bringing to market to really look at this on an end-to-end perspective. So let's jump into that a little bit here. For those of you that haven't seen Line before, I'm going to just quickly talk through kind of the themes that we find around what we call our 5 phases of maturity. And the first one is what we call Ad-Hoc. And so anything in our environment that we kind of classify as ad hoc means that we're at high risk, and it's generally due to poor visibility. It's something that we just don't have eyes on. And the reality is these days, there's very little that we don't have eyes on, but oftentimes it's just fragmented, as we'll see here in the next phase. However, there are still some gaps. And so, for example, one of the reasons why Loop1 has partnered with Runecast is because they do a nice job of covering that VMware vulnerability gap. And also, Jeff, one of the areas I think SolarWinds is continuing to work on is kind of creating better visibility into the cloud. And for me, for example, one of the things that I really struggle with is cloud storage visibility. And I realize, you can't speak too much about roadmap, but what are your thoughts there in terms of, help? What gaps do you see in clients, and what SolarWinds is doing to help close those gaps?
Yeah, Bill, great question. And I think, part of that is this acceleration of digital transformation, and really, what the global pandemic has done to how we work has really created some new gaps. And so, SolarWinds is really focused on how we can solve those gaps, right? So as folks move more of their workloads to the cloud, how can we get better visibility for those customers of those workloads, especially as they scale up or become elastic, right? How can we provide that visibility? But also, how can we, show customers for their cloud workloads what makes sense to be on-prem versus in the cloud? And let's make some recommendations about that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there are organizations today that feel like they've got some ad hoc, level issues where there is risk due to, monitoring what is work from home versus what is still on-prem versus what's in the cloud. And I think that is going to be a challenge for organizations, over this next year to really understand, what can you control versus what can you monitor. And so really the next phase of maturity that we've witnessed over the years is what we kind of call fragmented. And this is where we sort of see what we consider silos, but at their worst. And this is where I want to kind of defend silos for a moment, right? I don't think silos are bad. Like there's grain silos and they do really good things. There's miso silos, which are kind of violent but important. They've got some expertise there. So to me, a silo is not a bad thing. A silo represents strength and expertise and competency. But what we really need is fully meshed silos. So, when we see organizations historically investing in tools, they create this really difficult challenge of now bringing those tools back together because this group's using tool from vendor A and that group's using tool from vendor B. And so as we move through the maturity model, one of the things we'll talk about is fewer vendors, but just as many solutions, and that's where SolarWinds really shines. But just before we get ahead of ourselves there, Jeff, what are your thoughts on sort of this idea of being fragmented because we've got silos that might be really expert, but they're not sharing information?
Yeah, and I love what you said there, and I even wrote it down. I don't know if you caught that, but fully meshed silos. I'm going to start using that. I think that's great, right? Because to your point, like within these silos, we have folks that are experts at what they do. Um, but if they don't share what they're doing with these other silos, we don't get to reap the benefit of that full picture, right? We're only focused on what we're doing. We're only focused on our area. How do we open up those silos, keep that expertise, but connect the data?
Exactly. And I think one of the challenges for that is being able to do it in a way that people can trust, right? Where they know that they're sharing information, but they're not exposing administrative control. They're not putting the environment at risk, and they're not creating security issues. So there's certainly a set of challenges there that we want to be cognizant of. And again, I think SolarWinds is doing a nice job of making this easy. When we get to optimize here in a moment, we'll talk about the concept of delegated access, which I think SolarWinds does better than anybody. But where we generally find ourselves along this journey is our typical tier. And we basically, the theme here is noise. We've got too many tools, too many alerts, not enough training, and not enough budget for new hires or training to really get our hands around these tools. And so then these tools are just sort of feeding into those segregated silos, and there's a lack of information sharing. So the challenge becomes, and this is where I think most clients find themselves today, how do we get past this, right?
Yeah, and this is also where we see most of our customers today, right? That haven't gone through something like Lime or don't have a dedicated team to really focus on this. And their number one thing is like, how do I cut through this noise? I need to know what matters. I don't need to know all of this stuff. Just bring me what matters so I can deal with that. And so I think, as we think about what Lime can provide, we also think about how technology can advance and really provide some enhancements around that. And I think you'll see that in our roadmap as well.
And so that's where we're trying to help organizations get to sort of the next step for most organizations. And there are some that are here, some are further than others. I don't want to act like nobody's gotten here yet. And in a moment here, we'll get to what we call insightful. And I think there are some clients that are beginning to really demonstrate great methods of being insightful. But the theme of optimized is what I'm really excited about with SolarWinds and what they're doing with their products and their licensing, because here what we're looking for is automated correlation. Right? We talked about, we've got our silos, they've got their experts, they've got their tools, and they can tell their story really well. But how well can you share that information, and how well can you make that information accessible to others? So in SolarWinds, when we talk about AppStack, and we talk about PerfStack, we have these two outstanding features that take broad parts of our monitoring and observability capabilities and tie them together automatically. If you haven't been paying attention to AppStack, but you're an Orion owner, you've been missing a key piece of functionality, and the same is true for PerfStack. This is really the story and the journey that SolarWinds is taking clients on now more than ever to automatically correlate. Jeff?
Yeah, and two of my favorite features within our portfolio, right? And I think really largely driven by what our customers were asking for. And so, taking all of that data within those silos and connecting it on the back end to get that full stack picture is extremely valuable and allows folks to really get to MTTR a lot faster than they would with these siloed products, unconnected data in their environments.
And the exciting thing too, on top of that for us has been IT leadership, right? Executives and budget owners are realizing that, oh, wow, I can focus our energy through SolarWinds and Loop1 and still get all of the tools that I need for each of my teams. I'm not going to leave anybody with a lesser quality tool, whether it's database, whether it's virtualization, whether it's storage. SolarWinds has tools for the whole organization, but now I have fewer vendors. It takes less time to do procurement. It takes less time to do deployment. I can do better training because I've got one partner to work with that can train across all these different tools. And so what we're seeing is that this concept of data correlation is also lending itself to tool consolidation and vendor consolidation to reduce costs. Have you guys been seeing a bit of that same trend, Jeff, I would imagine?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as we've engaged with customers, really what they're looking for is how can we, to your point, do some tool or vendor consolidation. It's not about the number of tools as much as it is the increased risk and overhead associated with those tools. So, how can we think about risk out, cost out, and becoming more agile within these IT environments for our customers? And so, we're having those kind of conversations of like, let us bring you some actual business value to ensure that you're set up for success and have the right things in place.
And so that's kind of, driving success is this last phase of the maturity phases of maturity here. And we call it insightful. But what it really is all about is driving outcomes. And so we see this manifest a few different ways. I've got clients that we've worked with over the years that have Tableau aggregating IT tools data. There's a product out there called Click that is another business intelligence type tool that some of our clients use. And then even just something like Power BI. We're here at Loop1, we teach the Orion 301 course, which is all about leveraging SWCL and the Orion SDK to help do analytics, right? And so I think that's what we're talking about here. And we talk about getting the tools deployed in a way that we're collecting the right information, we're getting that information retained in a way that's useful, and we're using it to drive outcomes. And those outcomes are really driving business decisions, helping with budgeting through forecasting for capacity across all of our technology tiers, which then lends itself to right sizing our teams. And then that lends itself to having a clear budget for training for that team. So there's a lot of different ways that having the right tools deployed the right way, working with the right partners, drives actual financial results in an organization. Now, this is not something that we generally find ourselves talking about, the financial results of a partner because of their tools investment. But if we're not paying attention to the bottom line, we're not really helping, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's where you guys can come in and give them that lens to see that. And so I think that's really the excitement for me as a SolarWinds employee to have such a good partner that can help our customers get that view.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jeff. So let's talk a little bit more briefly here about AppStack and PerfStack. Jeff, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So kind of as mentioned, two of my favorite features within the platform, both the Orion platform and our observability offering. But with AppStack, really what that allows you to do is kind of break down those silos, those personnel silos that we've talked about, right? We're collecting data from different parts of the IT stack and correlating that on the back end to really allow folks to pinpoint the root cause of any performance issues associated with an application. So you have a poor performing application. There's so many parts that make up that application today, and they can be in so many different locations. We're seeing that complexity grow and grow with modernization of these applications. So you could have an app server sitting in Azure, and you could be running RDS. You could have some storage that's somewhere else. There's just all kinds of new complexities with the advancements in technology. And I think AppStack really allows us to get that visibility to IT professionals exactly how they need it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that really I find valuable when working with clients and introducing them to AppStack is no one person knows anymore how everything ties together. They only, really have expertise into their tier. Storage guys are confident that their storage is performing well. The virtualization folks are confident that virtualization is performing well. The database team knows that they're rocking it, but it's hard for an application owner to look at what they're delivering to an end user and say with confidence, here's my delivery infrastructure. And AppStack helps answer that question. And then in terms of tuning that performance, PerfStack builds on those relationships and allows us to see things, in some cases, in real time.
Yeah. Pulling that time series data together and overlaying it so you can really see, to your point, what is happening in real time. So, we've identified a problem with AppStack. Let's take a little bit deeper of a look by pulling this data into a single dash, seeing the metrics and logs and analytics come in real time, so we can look at that data real time as well as historical to identify, where the issue might be.
And this is where I think SolarWinds has begun to unlock observability for our traditional IT roles. So those of us that are used to looking at metrics and used to talking about performance and availability and driving, things from a perspective of making sure plenty of resources are available. One of the things that PerfStack can do that you may or may not have seen yet, and if you haven't seen this yet, I encourage you to follow up with Loop1 or with Jeff's team and somebody can give you a demo of this, but you can put event data, what might be traditionally considered observability data from logs, into your PerfStack view, and you can start to correlate when this particular event occurs, what's the impact to performance. It's a really nice way for observability to start to present itself in this story.
Yeah, and the events is amazing. I think the next level that we get to and think about is like the seasonality of that data, right? What is abnormal? What is normal? And really highlighting that as well as an event within PerfStack of like, hey, this is not right. You really need to dig into this.
So as we talk about all this, I sometimes feel like in these webinars, like, oh, it all sounds good. It all sounds like big promises that vendors like to make. How do you really make it happen? So I'm going to relatively quickly here, for the sake of time, go through what we call our 6 maturity assessment areas. But this, more than anything, is how Loop1 partners with SolarWinds to make the rubber meet the road, to really drive outcomes. And it starts with what we call adoption and enablement, which is to understand your stakeholders. Who are your application owners? What are they delivering to those end users? And how is it instrumented? How is it monitored? What are we doing with observability for application tracing? And how are we tying that all together in the ways that we just talked about, using features like AppStack and PerfStack to drive optimized correlation, right? To do that, we quite often find that there's a lack of understanding. We call this becoming feature complete. And in order to get feature complete, you have to have feature awareness. You have to understand what's possible. This is also a way to help drive tool consolidation, because we oftentimes will find that we've got tools with overlapping capabilities. And in many cases, you've got SolarWinds in the environment, but you've also got some other third-party tool, and the third-party tool is more expensive and redundant. And we can oftentimes introduce features that I hear people say all the time, and it still blows me away. I didn't know that SolarWinds can do that. So Jeff, you're laughing, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean all the time, and shame on us. I mean, we've got to figure out a better way. And I think through assessments, maturity assessments like Lime, you can unlock that value for customers and help them really with some cost savings. But yeah, hear it time and time again. I didn't know that SolarWinds could do that, and we can. It's great. We just got to get in there and really help folks unlock those features.
Exactly. And that's the thing that's a kicker to me is We got one client in particular, and you probably heard me use this quote before, but they came to me and they said, Bill, until you showed us SAM, we had this investment in this other technology, and it was kind of like we went out and bought the Ferrari, put it in the garage, and only used it to listen to the radio. That's a direct quote from a client. And it's just so funny to me because they were able to eliminate that tool, save the money associated with that tool investment, which is not just the licensing costs, right? Training costs and staffing costs and all of the things that it takes to make a tool functional. And they were able to replace it with SAM. And they were completely content with what SAM was able to do for them. And then this one was in particular around database monitoring and App Insight for SQL. So again, it was just a feature they didn't know about. One that I've been banging the drum on lately, especially for our network teams that are out there doing infrastructure services, have you seen App Insight for Active Directory? I'll throw that little tease out there and I'll let you guys come back to it. So continuing on through our assessment areas here, in the interest of time, keep moving a little bit. The next thing that we want to talk about is what we're gathering. We call this the performance and availability metrics. And I really probably need to update this to be more observability oriented so that I can be talking about not just performance and availability metrics, but also logs and potentially traces. Because here what we're talking about is building data you can trust and sharing that data across multiple teams. It's that ability to know that you're going to be able to do the analytics that you need to do for our outcomes because your IT tools are implemented correctly. And of course, SolarWinds is making this as easy as ever with the way that features like AppStack and PerfStack work. So
Yeah,
there, go ahead, Jeff.
no, I was just going to say a really important part of what you just said there, right, is data you can trust, right? And that's key. Data is the foundation of monitoring and observability, and you've got to have good data to get that complete picture.
And I think that's one of the things we're going to see. For those of you that have paid attention to Thwack lately, there is a beta happening now for a new functionality called AI Ops. And this is where SolarWinds is headed with intelligent alerting, but there's more to come. So again, I will try not to comment too much on the roadmap, but if you're interested in participating in that beta, head out to Thwack, look for the AI Ops beta, and you'll be able to sign up for that. Or shoot a note over to myself or Jeff, and we can get connected to that product team. So moving then into what we call to me, this is a bit of an extension of being feature complete. It's sort of the security and compliance aspect of what we're doing. To some extent, to a small extent, this is about making sure your tools are deployed securely. But we've been through that over this last year. We know what we mean to be secure by design. Loop1 has come to market with what we call our certified secure Orion offer. So if you still have any concerns lingering about the security of your Orion deployment, we can help you with that. But what we're really talking about here is leveraging, again, features that people oftentimes don't know about, and it falls into two categories. And it's about leveraging all of the tools that are available from SolarWinds. So people sometimes get overwhelmed by the concepts in cybersecurity. I've been doing cybersecurity since I did my CISSP back in 2001, and I find it really easy to just break it into two categories. First, what we have is what we call our configuration security, and this is our ability to say, what are we designing? Did we deploy it the way it was designed, and did it stay that way? So this is about change management and change audit and even remediation when we find things that are no longer configured the way they were meant to be, or when we have an update to a configuration. Now, we see SolarWinds really shine in this arena with tools like NCM and policy compliance, as well as the new SCM tool and the new features that are being added to that to really enrich its capability to do similar things in the server space. From there, we move into operational security. And now this is about a lot of kind of this observability technology, terminology for logs, at least, and in some cases tracing, where we're talking about tools like SolarWinds SCM, right, the Security Event Manager, but we're also talking about tools like ARM, Access Rights Manager, and the ability to both audit and manage Active Directory, which once again ties back to SolarWinds delegated access capabilities that make it easier to grant administrative capabilities with controls and have greater control over that. So the next thing that we're talking about is, again, it's near and dear to me right now because I'm teaching the 301 class next week. If you are interested in attending the 301 class next week, raise your hand. But this is about, everybody in the world is talking about AI and ML right now. And, I probably need to update this because AI, to some extent is gaining some reality. So when I first wrote this, it was like, let's talk about real AI. Let's talk about automation and integration. And SolarWinds, with the SDK that they offer and the way that they integrate their tools together, has done a great job of this. And of course, integrating the tools like ServiceNow as well. And so, Jeff, can you kind of give us a hint as to where the integration side of this is going? Is there any piece of the roadmap you want to hint at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see some new integrations in the future, especially around observability on how we integrate, regardless of where folks are deployed, right? And if you reference back a few slides, there's probably something in there that talks about a cloud connector, right? And so, how can we integrate data that's collected from a SaaS offering to our on-prem offering in a single view, connect that data, enrich it, and provide meaningful insight to our customers?
Sounds like we should be paying close attention. And so, that really does lead us to this final piece of what we call our 6 assessment areas. They form the roadmap that we build with each client when we work with them. And that is, why are we here? What are the outcomes that we're trying to drive? Let's talk about something beyond just keeping things online, because I think we can all agree when things go down, that's the easiest problem to solve in our world, right? It's no longer about monitoring what's up or down. It's not red, yellow, green anymore. Now it's about putting our IT tools data to work to make better business decisions. So we talked about before in that 5th phase of maturity. And this is the reality of whether it's using integrated dashboards or whether we're integrating multiple tools, whether we're bringing in a tool like Tableau or Click or Power BI, whatever the methodology is, we want to bring this IT tools data to bear. And so when you work with Loop1, it's more than just an idea. It's more than just a marketing pitch. It's literally how we run our projects to go, we use these types of questions and the frameworks that feed out of this to design, deploy, and run tools, and in particular, tools from SolarWinds. So on that note, here's a bit of a peek into what's coming next from SolarWinds. Jeff, do you want to walk us through it?
Yeah, and 2022 is going to be really exciting with a number of different releases and new offerings that we're bringing to market. And one of those offerings is our on-premises observability suite. And so today we can have conversations about what that really is. And there's going to be 2 offerings, the Essentials and the Advanced, which will effectively be all of this functionality that we've really talked about through this presentation to get you that full stack visibility in a single offering, a single installation, a single key, but also give you the flexibility of deploying how you want, right? So, additional polling engines or web servers or EOC, all of that within this kind of observability offering. And so, these are the 2 offerings that are currently available. And as we continue to iterate and release throughout the year, you'll see some enhancements and additions to this.
So this is currently in pilot. I should say that there are some partners that are in the pilot. Loop1 is one of them.
That's right.
So you can certainly work with us to get access to these new SKUs. One of the most convenient aspects of these new SKUs is they are host-based licensing or node-based licensing. Jeff, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and through my 11 and a half years at SolarWinds, one of the more interesting, I'll say, conversations that I've had with clients is around our licensing, right? You've got modules that solve real problems, but they're all licensed differently. And so that created a lot of complexity within our customers and conversations, frankly. And so, one of the things that our customers are really asking us for is node-based licensing. Let me come to you, tell you how many nodes or IPs I have in the environment that I need to add to the solution, and you just charge me by that. So both of these, or this offering, is all node-based. So very easy conversation, very easy to determine where you would fall and what that would look like.
And so just quickly, for those of you that are here and you're looking at this and thinking, well, what does this mean to me today? Let me make it as easy as I can for you. If you own NPM and SAM, you are in the Essentials tier. But going forward, for your Essentials investment, you're going to see Log Viewer, IPAM, UDT, and making sure I got my notes right here, VNQM, right? So really a great additional functionality that SolarWinds has made available for years. But frankly, As Jeff kind of alluded to, it wasn't as easy to buy as it maybe could have been. And so now making it a part of this essentials package that is available on a subscription-based license and a node-based approach makes it a lot easier. Now, I'm sure several of you heard me say SAM and NPM and then stop. And you go, wait a minute, what about NCM and NetFlow, which most of you probably own those four. We find more commonly the clients that Loop1 works with generally own those four products. That puts you into what's called the advanced tier. So now you've got all of the things that I just mentioned, plus you've got obviously NTA and NCM, and now also VMAN and SCM. So Jeff, do you want to comment a little bit from sort of that module to this observability licensing sort of, I realize it's not always apples and apples, but you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, no, I think you really nailed it. I think what we're really trying to do is, as Bill mentioned, make it as easy as possible, not only to purchase, but as we move forward, you're not doing module upgrades. You're doing a single upgrade in your environment, and so really what we're looking at is like, how can we reduce complexity around this environment to make things easier for our customers and more consumable. And so that advanced tier does include the advanced package, does include kind of that flow and bandwidth monitoring, the virtualization manager, and the configuration management, which are three really important parts of the puzzle.
Exactly. And so I'm excited for clients to be able to get their hands on all of this functionality more often. Some of you may have taken in the past our Orion 101 class that we teach, and we always cover IPAM and UDT and VNQM, and people see those products and they're like, oh, this is cool. We'll think about it. Well, now you don't have to think about it. You move into the essentials licensing, you move into the subscription model. There's some great offers available right now to help you make that transition. Your leadership will love it because it's going to be more affordable. Jeff, I'll leave it at that. But it's going to bring all this functionality to bear and really drive that story about fully meshed silos and integrated data. So the last piece there, then you'll notice the bottom of the slide talks about, well, what if I have additional polling engines? And this is a great story too, because now it's not just the additional polling engines you'll get access to. Jeff, do you want to talk about what that enterprise scale brings?
Yeah, so Enterprise Scale Edition really includes a lot of the flexibility around scale and deployment that some customers will be looking for. So if you go with the Enterprise Scale Edition, you get additional polling engines included, you get web servers included, you get high availability and resiliency, which is super important in today's world. Lab licenses, like I can't tell you how many times customers have said, why don't you just give me a lab license? Well, now it's included with that offering. And then Enterprise Operations Console. And you may be saying, why would I need Enterprise Operations Console for kind of this single package? Another value add to this observability offering is that you can come in and say, I want the advanced enterprise scale edition for 5,000 nodes, but I am geographically dispersed and I want to stand up multiple instances, one in North America, one in EMEA, one in APAC, and tie it together with EOC. Well, we're not asking you to buy 3 different instances. We're just saying, come in, buy the number of nodes you want, and then you'll have the ability through the licensing framework to deploy those instances as long as you stay within that node limit. So really exciting stuff that our customers have been asking for.
That is perhaps one of the most exciting aspects of this whole transition and this evolution of the SolarWinds tools and the organization. And I mean, Sudhakar and his team are just nailing it right now, because I can tell you, we've had clients that have looked at this and gone, really? I can just now implement worldwide and have multiple instances, have high availability, and I'm basically, purchasing in the same methodology I was always looking at kind of before, but now it's easier and there's more included. Yeah, and the short answer is yes. Getting into that enterprise scale edition on an advanced license is going to give you the greatest flexibility for a global deployment that we've ever seen from SolarWinds. So it's a very cool time to be a SolarWinds client right now, and partner for that matter. So we're getting to the end of the hour here. I do want to try and leave some time for questions. I will just share with you, if you want to check it out, we've got a new sort of self-assessment on our website. We call it our Lime Calculator. It's 21 questions, takes about 5 minutes to get through. It's brand new. So as you go through it, if you see anything that looks a little wonky, please give us some feedback. Let us know what you think we could do to improve it. And hopefully you'll find something that you can take back in your teams and partner with your colleagues to help drive maturity in your organization. And of course, if you are a Loop1 client, feel free to reach out to your service delivery manager and partner with them to talk about your roadmap for Lime. And with that, I think we're ready to open it up to some questions. So we've got chat going here. Feel free to throw a question into chat. Had a comment earlier from Michael Kent, thank you, commenting at how AppStack and PerfStack were game changing and bringing their teams together. So that's great to see some real world acknowledgement there. Anybody else have any questions? And Jeff, any final thoughts you want to share while we wait for questions?
Just really excited about kind of the direction of SolarWinds and really working with our customers to get them what they've been asking for a long time. Excited to see how they react and how we can make their lives better.
All right, so we do have a few questions in here. Let's see what we got here. Observability
is in the Q&A panel, Bill. Yeah,
I'm looking at that now.
Cool.
I'm looking at observability is new to me as a NOC manager, traditional eyes on glass monitoring. We have cloud-based network and apps. We only monitor the network side of the house. So how do we incorporate observability to the network since I have no observability apps APM? That's a great question. You want to talk about app optics and what SolarWinds is kind of working on the roadmap there?
Yeah, so today we would do that with the Observability on-premises offering or the Orion platform, but then we also have an offering that's really focused on APM, and that's App Optics. I think as you watch the journey and the transformation of SolarWinds, you'll see this Observability as a Service offering come out. And that's really where you're going to get that connected story between networks and APM and apps, all in a single view and single console with the connected data. So I would say stay tuned for more on that. We can do it today with the offerings that we have, but we're definitely making some huge investments in that area. I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and Ben, on that one, as you look at how you might take this conversation back to the rest of your team, just as Jeff said, right? There's some things we can show them now if you want to go back to your leadership and say, hey, we should pay attention. SolarWinds is bringing new offers to market, and this is really interesting. And then Jeff and his team, in partnership with our team, can go and show clients what that looks like, including proofs of concepts and things along those lines. And to Michael Kent, your question about what does this mean for those that are Loop1 customers that are, wanting to also be able to engage with SolarWinds in the field, so to speak. Does that mean we're going to be sort of stepping on each other's toes? And I would say it's quite the opposite. What we will find is that SolarWinds knows who we're working with, and when we have a partnership in place, we'll be working with you together, right? You might see Jeff and I in a phone call with your organization if you'd like to see that. You might see other members of our sales team working hand in hand with the SolarWinds sales team, or our support teams, as we always have, continuing to work hand in hand with the SolarWinds support teams and client success teams. If you didn't notice, there was an announcement earlier this year that SolarWinds has named a new VP of Global Channel, a gentleman named Jeff McCullough. And Jeff has been fantastic in architecting a new organization that's helping to ensure that those things continue to happen, that Loop1 and SolarWinds really get to partner kind of the way we are today, Jeff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say some of my favorite engagements in the field and with customers is really when we're engaged with a partner like Loop1 and we can get in there together and understand what our customers are trying to achieve and partner on helping them be successful.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And so one last question here. Ignacio Perez was asking, is UDT part of any of these packages? And as you may have heard me say there towards the middle of that observability conversation, UDT is included in the essentials tier. It's included in that first tier now, along with IPAM and VNQM. So those kind of, and log analyzer, sort of the lesser, generally the lesser owned modules, log analyzer, VNQM, IPAM, and UDT are all part of the essentials tier. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Yep, you nailed it.
Perfect. All right. Well, that brings us up to the end of the hour. This has been great. I'm excited for 2022. I'm excited for, you know, where SolarWinds has gone with the licensing, with observability and the subscription-based models that are available now, the consolidated installers and the ease of administration. Yeah, Ben, we will share that slide deck out for those of you who'd like to see it. The session's been recorded, so Helen will get that out to everybody, and then we'll also be making the slides available as well. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited for 2022.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. Me too.
All right, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.